Hello, everyone, and welcome to This. This is Pastor's Monday morning quarterbacking of the sermon for the previous week. And this video is for the third Sunday in Lent, which was on Sunday, March 7th. First of all, I should let you know that if you hear any banging around or any loud noises, it's because they're working on the roof right above me. And second of all, as an introduction to this video, I'll let you be aware that I am in the church kitchen. Hopefully you recognize that. And there's a reason for that that's connected with what I'm going to talk about. The scripture passages, I'm starting to list those in the introduction to the video here on YouTube and then also on Facebook. So look for the scripture references there. But the scripture that I wanted to actually talk about with you today is the psalm that we had, which was Psalm 19. And what I'm going to talk about is kind of an extension of the children's message, believe it or not, that my mind kind of ran away with after the fact. So there's a part of Psalm 19 where it talks about the teachings of God, and it uses some imagery to help attach the teachings with God to good things that people value or things that people enjoy. And so there's this whole, it's kind of like a litany of, and it uses different words for the teachings of the Lord, and then it says something good about it. So it begins, the teaching of the Lord is perfect and revives the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure and gives wisdom to the simple. The statutes of the Lord are just and rejoice the heart. The commandment of the Lord is clear and gives light to the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean and endures forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. And then the next verse uses these two things to associate God's ways, God's teachings with something positive that in human life anyway. So the first one is that they are to be desired like fine gold. The second one is the one I'm going with that I talked about in the children's message, and that was that they were sweeter far than honey in the comb. So the teachings of the Lord being sweeter than honey. And what I did for the children's message anyway is I pulled out this honeycomb that my husband and I had bought a couple years ago for, to eat because it's sweet. I like to put it in my tea, but you can also eat, you can eat it if you want to. That's a little bit too much sweetness for me. But, so the honeycomb, because it is something sweet. It is something that human beings tend to enjoy. And so this is attaching a taste with the teachings of the Lord. In the children's message, I had the kids think about things that they enjoy that are sweet. And for you today, I just, since I'm in the kitchen, pulled out a couple. Some of these are from home, so we don't necessarily just have them in the kitchen. But a little packet of sugar or some sprinkles are usually sweet, or some syrup. Or I found these are from home. They're peanut butter chips. Those are sweet and tasty as well. So, anything that's sweet that we enjoy, attaching that with the teachings of the Lord to help our being associate God's teachings with whatever it is that we like, appreciate, enjoy. Now, if we take this then a step further and we think about the ways of God being attached to a taste that we like, that makes us feel, that gives us a good feeling. We look at the first reading, which was a litany of the 10 Commandments from Exodus. So these are God's teachings. So we think about God's teaching about that worshiping one God, worshiping the God that saved God's people, the God that saves God's people. We think about the teaching about getting rest in the midst of many days of work that God says you need rest. Think of the teaching of preserving life, preserving the lives of others. Thou shalt not murder. Being faithful in relationships. Thou shalt not commit adultery. So all of these teachings, if we associate them with sweetness, it's like, so preserving life is sweetness. Being faithful in relationships is sweetness. Appreciating what we have and not wanting what other people have is sweetness. Making that association. Then we go to the gospel, and Jesus is overturning tables, and in that gospel passage. And so if we go with this idea of taste, Jesus is seeing practices that, rather than being associated with sweetness, are putting a bad taste in Jesus' mouth, so to speak. And the taste I have for you associated with a bad taste is if you put baking powder on your tongue. Ugh. Basically, that feeling of ugh. So Jesus is seeing practices by the religious leaders who were supposed to be sharing the sweetness of God. Jesus is instead seeing what they're doing, and it's giving Jesus this taste in his mouth, like baking powder. And so Jesus wants to do something about it. And some of these practices include making the people feel like they need to work so hard in order to earn God's care, but God's love and care, when they're already working hard and they're already very pressed in their lives, and they're already very burdened in their lives as well. And the religious leadership, rather than helping them taste some sweetness in their life of God's ways, are putting burdens on top of burdens, and it brings a bitter taste, or it brings a yuck taste to the situation. So if we want to take this a step further, then how do we think about God's ways and the ways in which we function in the world, and the things that are happening in the world? And when we see something happening in front of us, does it remind us of the sweetness of God's ways, or does it give us this look? That's not, nope, that's not God's sweetness at all. And then we can also extend this to the ways in which we interact with others, and reflect upon, does this way that we interact, did that bring sweetness to somebody's life and to our life, or did it bring a yucky taste into our lives? And so this is, I guess, for people who maybe like to eat or people who like to have some other kind of tangible connection with faith and with God and God's ways, to think then about, when we, in our faith lives first, are we, what we are experiencing in our faith lives, our connection with God, is it sweetness? Because it's supposed to be. It is supposed to be sweetness. And if it's this blah feeling and taste that is associated with our faith lives, then maybe there's a teaching going on that isn't right, or maybe we have an understanding that isn't right. There's the roofers there. So in our own faith lives, which flavor are we experiencing? And then in our interactions in life and in the world, which flavor are we seeing most? And how can God use us to share God's sweetness in people's lives, and to be able to share more sweetness in society and in the world around us? So I hope I didn't make you too hungry. They're starting to get kind of rowdy up there and doing hard work, and we appreciate the work that our roofers are doing from Holco. But it was my thought for this week, and I appreciate you watching, and I encourage you to think about what this means for you, and please share some thoughts in the comments on our YouTube channel or on Facebook, and God bless.